I've been keeping these for 20 years, but after 7 years of keeping these, I can tell you, they're a whole lot better. This is Cookie, my oldest African Fat-Tailed Gecko. She is beautiful, I love her, she's calm, and there's so many reasons why I choose to keep more of these than leopard geckos now. Keep in mind, this is my personal experience keeping leopard geckos for 20 years, and I'm not stopping keeping leopard geckos, by the way, and I've been keeping these guys for almost 7 years now and breeding them for as long as I've been keeping them, and I much prefer African Fat-Tails to leopard geckos. The first reason I think that they're better is just they're less common, and this isn't a hipster, I've had it before it was cool type thing. It was just there's a little bit more wonderment about an animal that not everybody has and isn't clogging up your feed. If you're like me and you follow thousands of pages on Instagram, you probably see leopard geckos in your feed all day, every day. And that's fine. There are certain pages that I follow so I only see certain animals all the time. If my feed was nothing but golden retrievers and reptiles, which it kind of is, I'd be a happy guy. But to me, it's more fun seeing something in my own collection that I personally have that I don't see when I go to Instagram and scroll endlessly. If I doom scroll Instagram for 20 minutes, I'm probably gonna see several leopard geckos, but I don't really see African Fat-Tailed Geckos or many of the other animals that I have. And also because there's way fewer morphs, I don't covet the morphs that I see on the Instagram like I do with leopard geckos. Leopard geckos have a million different morphs, it seems like literally hundreds at this point, and some of them now are insane. The color is crazy, and I think, should I get that? But with African Fat-Tails, my personal favorite is just the way they look in the wild. And if you're new to reptiles, trying to pick which one's best for you, I think there's a little bit more fun in the hunt for information. Information is really easy to find on both of these animals. I did a leopard gecko care guide earlier this year. Please do watch it if you're considering getting a leopard gecko. But there's so much information about leopard geckos, and there has, and it's just almost like shooting fish in a barrel, because animals that everybody wants that are really popular, there are so many blog posts that I've seen or articles that I've seen where it's literally just AI ripping off a video, which I've seen so many times. If you look up leopard gecko articles, one of them is literally word for word a transcript of one of my videos. And because of this, it almost becomes more difficult to find the right information because there's so much regurgitation. Where with animals that are a little bit less common, but still decently common, where they're not unknown, you're gonna get people who are more interested in that specific species giving you that. This is a long-winded way to say you kind of actually get better information about African Fat-Tails and leopard geckos. Less morphs, their skin is a little bit softer than the bumpy skin of a leopard gecko, but not totally smooth, and they're still rugged. A more secretive animal, and the information's a little bit more secret too. I do think that there's a value of being a little bit less known, and it's still easy to keep them healthy. Just like I keep myself healthy with something that's relatively unknown with today's sponsor, Black Forest. It's insane to me that the benefits of cocoa flavanols are just unknown. The compounds found in cocoa that boost nitric oxide, improve heart health, and regenerate brain cells. Before you roll your eyes, before I was this guy, I was this guy. I am absolutely obsessed with health and wellness, and this fits the bill. But if you'd rather an actual Harvard scientist tell you, Dr. William Lee has got it for you right here.
Well, clinical studies have been done with high flavanol cocoa to show that in like men who are in their 60s with heart disease, they could actually have 2 cups of dark chocolate hot cocoa a day for a month. Yeah. And they doubled the amount of stem cells in their bloodstream, and their circulation improved measurably. And then what's even more important and impressive is that there was a study called the Cosmos study that was completed recently that showed that eating high flavanol cocoa decreases the risk of cardiovascular death, right, over a period
like a statin.
Like a statin, right. Exactly. Except made with by eating the same thing that you use to make chocolate. So we're not telling people to go out to have chocolate, which is a confection. There's got a lot of sugar and all kinds of other stuff in it. But it's the stuff underlying it.
You know that thing about dark chocolate is good for you? Well, the flavanols in the cocoa is, but those are usually destroyed during the process of making the actual chocolate. That's where Black Forest supplements come in. They've created the first ever high flavanol cocoa powder packed with everything your body actually needs, and it's only 20 calories. I mix it in my protein shake every day. I've been a customer for a while now, brain fog is gone, energy is up. So I reached out to Black Forest and said, hey, I like your stuff, my audience would too, can we give them a discount? And they said, yeah, but only 48 hours. So go to the link below or in the pinned comment, go to Black Forest. I'm telling you, I stand behind this stuff and get it before it's gone because it sells out fast. The second reason is they're more secretive, and this is something that normally I would say would go against an animal, but the reason that a more secretive animal in comparison to an animal that is out all the time is more interesting to me, in my opinion, is they're more natural, more naturalistic, the way you'd see them in the wild. In the wild, an African fat-tailed gecko or a leopard gecko, or basically any species, doesn't just wake up and walk directly out where there's no cover. In the wild, there are exposure elements like rain and wind and sun and predators being the main ones, so animals don't just get up and walk out. An animal's gonna kind of snoop around, see what's going on, stick their head out, and I think I see much more naturalistic behavior with my African fat-tailed geckos than my leopard gecko. And if you're someone who wants a display piece, African fat-tailed geckos are great because A, they're a little bit easier in my opinion because of the care, which we'll get to in a second, and they're gonna act a lot more natural. So you have a naturalistic setup that looks like a piece of Africa where they're from, and then you have an animal that acts like it's still in Africa, which to me is really cool. Now, if you want an animal that just bumbles around with no care in the world, leopard geckos are definitely for you. And not saying that these animals are like so secretive that you have to dig them out all the time. You're gonna see them wandering around, but it's more of a big deal when you do. My leopard geckos, I've got so many of them and they're out all the time. So I walk down and I expect to see them. When I walk down to see my African fat-tail enclosure, if I see Cookie or one of my other ones walking around, it's kind of exciting. I walk down and I'm like, oh wow. And then I stop and I look and it's just almost like an event to me. And because of this, I think they're a little bit less stress prone, which seems kind of backwards thinking, but I really thought about it and I think that they are less apt to be stressed. In fact, their tails are less apt to fall off. Now, this is a bad example because Cookie actually did lose part of her tail, but it was because big boy Billy was very rough during breeding season. So this was an incident of a aggressive male that no longer breeds her because he is way too aggressive. But anyway, when they grow their tails back, they do look kind of ugly, like the back of this one right here. The third reason is personality. The personality of leopard geckos is great. And if you haven't got so far, I don't actually think leopard geckos suck. I just truly do think that these animals are more interesting. So I'd say don't come at me in the comments, but I know you will, which is fine. Thanks for the engagement. Appreciate it. I do think the personality is a little bit more gentle and curious in a African fat-tailed gecko in comparison to a leopard gecko. Let's put it this way. I'm gonna make a comparison to two dogs that you don't know, so this might not make sense. But anyway, I've got two girl dogs. One is Nellie, nervous Nellie. We named her Nellie because she was nervous. She's so sweet and she kind of just gently nudges you and she wants your attention and wants your love. But then I've got Josephine, who is very bold and will literally bulldoze into you to say, hey, it's time to pet me now. Completely different personalities, and I like both, but I gravitate a lot towards Nellie, not that I have picking favorites or anything, because she's kind and sweet and gentle and just, there's something about her. And I think that African fat-tailed geckos are kind of the same way. They're not as bold. You can pick them up and hold them, but they're gonna be a little bit apprehensive maybe to walk on your hand. So when they do, it feels almost like an accomplishment, but they're also less skittish in my opinion. So instead of running away, although most leopard geckos are really easy to tame down, some of them just want nothing to do with you. And I've even got one, Sunrise, or had one, she's a breeder for somebody else now, who would literally jump out of the enclosure like a reticulated python and try to bite me every time I opened it. Now, of course, this is really rare, but with African fat-tailed geckos, I've never had this. They generally seem to be a little bit more placid, reserved, calm, and quiet, and they're more apt to climb. A lot of people want to put these into an enclosure where it's naturalistic, and a lot of the part of the natural environment that you'll see is climbing opportunities, although these guys spend a lot of their time underground or under rocks and caves, not caves, but crevices, I'd say, that they make themselves. They do climb a little bit more because their hand structure is a little bit more robust than a leopard gecko. The fourth reason is their care. In my opinion, for most people, is a bit easier and more fun. I prefer environments that are a little bit more moist because I like to plant my enclosures with plants that are more colorful and, in my opinion, more pretty to look at than more succulents like you'd plant a naturalistic enclosure for a leopard gecko. Leopard geckos like it pretty dry, 30-40% humidity, something like that, where African fat-tailed geckos like it closer to 60% humidity, which might not seem like a big deal, but it is. The way that you can plant and keep the enclosure is much different. moss will grow at 70% humidity in the spots where it gets to 70%, although the most of the enclosure will be 50 or 60. You're probably not going to get moss to grow in an enclosure that is for a leopard gecko. Certain tropical plants aren't going to grow well for a leopard gecko where they will with an African fat-tail. And most of us live in an environment where keeping the humidity higher is easier than getting rid of the humidity. Places like southern Ontario where I live, it's so humid here, it's much easier to keep an animal humid than to take humidity away. If you live in Miami or places like that, probably easier for you. Otherwise, the care is exactly the same. Humidity is different. Everything else is the exact same. And instead of beating a dead horse as our fifth reason, I'm just gonna give you other options. If you're really looking for a leopard gecko and you've watched this video and think, African fat-tails aren't really for me, but I want something similar, there's some other good options. For example, banded geckos are a great option too. They still have the functioning eyelids and they have the same features basically as a leopard gecko or African fat-tail. But my best bet, especially if you like the humidity factor, is Chinese cave geckos. Chinese cave geckos are so freaking cool. I think they're so underrated. The issue is they're really reclusive in comparison to either one. They really don't like to be out. They really like to just kind of chill out by themselves. You don't see them out very often. And they are the type of animal where if you see them out, unlike an African fat-tailed gecko who will just kind of sit there and be like, oh, you got me, Chinese cave geckos might run away. So in my opinion, the best option if you don't like the two is Chinese cave geckos because they're the coolest looking and really fun to take care of because low temperatures and high humidity, which is like a cave. So cool. But I stand behind the fact I do think that African fat-tailed geckos are better than leopard geckos. And I want you to tell me in the comment section below, what do you think?